see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is a very real prospect of a new world order. The new world order does not mean surrendering our national sovereignty or forfeiting our interests.
He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial.
How can I convince you when your ears refuse to hear? You turn your heart away from me each time when I draw near. Your eyes refuse to meet with mine, they glance away in fear. As if you choose not to look at your reflection in the mirror.
Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall it being an expiration date on that.
Well, it doesn't show. How can I contain this anguish and this pain, knowing that your eyes are blinded by the lies?
He is the free American, Clay Douglas. Catch the Free American weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
Every time I think about the damage that's been done, the anger builds inside me till I'm almost overcome. I want to tear the moon out of the sky and drop the sun. Why do I feel so alone like I'm the only one?
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
You're so many darkness haunted by eternity. Like me into thunder in the shadows of the night. They break inside and enter through the windows of your mind. How can I?
And every time it's summertime, I answer to what I've done. Today what we got found, it used to be. They got no signs and no feel this game on me. A burning hill that boy I feel might rise away from me. It's high time we embrace the tool that keeps all men free. The United States means the straight in the heart of this. It is time for Clayton Douglas, the free American. Take it away, Clayton.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host. I'm Clay Douglas. My guest today is Dr. Jake Wade. Hello, Jake. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine. How are you this morning?
Well, I'm doing well. All things considered, it's I'm really having my belief system strengthened in a way. I've had some great guests on this week. Some things have been happening, and it's like confirming my belief that God's alive and well on the internet these days.
Amen.
And we've got some problems. We've got some problems, and I lay on most of these problems on the whole banking system. You know, it's and we've got so much research on this. I mean, I just started looking at some of I'm sorry, some of Jim Marrs' work. He says America is a country that lies to its children, hides the fact that we live under evil elite families who control our money through illegal Federal Reserve System. It's more than the Federal Reserve System. We've got what about all but 7 of the countries in the world that we send foreign aid to, including Israel and Russia even. Now this is just part of their plan to pull all of the wealth out of this country, I think, and they've certainly done it to our farmers. I mean, ninth plank on the Communist Manifesto is corporate farms. And I don't know many farms or ranchers out there that are doing well these days. Why not?
Well, first of all, I can tell you that the corporate farms, as you call them, are, and the problem is that a great number of them are not owned by Americans. The corporation is Chinese or Japanese or even Iranian, and there's an inherent problem with that. Is somebody owns your food supply, then you have a bit of a problem, and it's controlled by the wrong people, and the banking system is in the same dilemma in that the Federal Reserve is not controlled by our government. It's not, we have no say in it. It's controlled by the European Common Market gurus who pretty well determine interest rates and the condition the economy we live under, which is not a legitimate economic system to begin with. It's a fake one, kind of like Monopoly. The problem is they're playing Monopoly with our lives.
Now, Jim Marrs says they not only have a monopoly on our economy, they also destroyed our farmers. Now, that's been going on for almost 100 years, you know, trying to paying the farmers not to grow certain crops. And Jim says that we got to bring back the farmers because there's not enough jobs for everybody. The elite spit in our ancestors in our face by saying we're in debt after they stole all the money and the gold.
Can I address that?
Yes.
Because I have raised cattle and goats, and I am a rancher, and I have oat and wheat crops and that sort of thing. I can tell you that this is not some news reporter. This is not somebody doing research. This is me personally. And I can tell you that 20 years ago, I decided to raise Angora goats. That's the real long-haired goats that have very expensive fur on them, and or hair. And there was an aim at the time, I think it was Reagan that put it in, to balance this unbalance between foreign trade and American trade. There was an embargo placed on this, or a tax, if you will, for that Angora hair that went overseas or out of the country. Somebody had to pay a fee to get it in here, and it was passed along to we who were raising these animals and doing it locally. In other words, we benefited from what they were collecting. It was for the people, for the ranchers. And I believe it was Clinton that came along and did away with that and I had to get rid of Angora goats because no longer could I afford to raise them. And here again, this is our government claiming to be helping us when literally they cut the tops out from under us. At the same time, I used to operate on supply and demand on my ranch, and when corn prices went up, the price of cattle went up. And if you were a good businessman and managed your farm or ranch properly, you could get by all right. And you didn't have to compete with these enormous corporations that have the advantage of being able to diversify and have a whole bunch of people working for them and doing all the things you have to do yourself if you're a rancher. That has gone by the wayside through the help of our government. It wasn't just the corporations that bought these things, these ranches. It was our federal government that made the process a Wall Street game rather than buying and selling animals. They did the same thing to the oil and gas industry. They have done the same thing to nearly every enterprise this country is into in producing for ourselves, and now we can't because we can't compete with that system that's set up that's controlled by the government. Now they've got a regulatory overmaster for every one of these industries. The cattle industry doesn't rule itself. The oil and gas industry is under the Department of Transportation. It no longer rules itself. And when they did, steel industry, same way. When these industries ruled themselves, they had to be American spirit. They did the American thing, and they produced and made a profit and hired a bunch of people, and people went home and sat in front of their TV and enjoyed their beer and their pizza. That ain't happening anymore.
Now, you have Timothy Bible College. You have the Little Red Schoolhouse. And I think that's a good idea. I thought it was a good idea 20 years ago. And, you know, and I might point out if your children are in the Little Red Schoolhouse and they're using their computer to do their lessons, they're not likely to get shot at Columbine or Sandy Hook or blown up at and burned alive like they were at Waco. Which, by the way, was a self-sufficient family farm and a church. So,
yes.
the...
Yes. And my Constitution should have been left alone, and when it wasn't, the local sheriff should have run off the feds and said, y'all don't belong here, this is my county.
Should have, and we've got maybe 300 sheriffs now that will. So we have it, sometimes like right now probably. I mean we've got problems that come up that have no business, no relation to anything that we're doing, any of the plans that we've got. Just things out of the blue, you know. You lost a truck over the weekend, and in an accident. So, you know, things like that happen outside sources, but we can compete with that, and we can handle that if everything's running properly. But if the government is messing with us, if the government is harassing us, if our neighbors are harassing us, then we're having problems created that it's very hard to combat with everything else. Hard to save the world when you know the Chihuahua's nipping at your heels. I guess I'm trying to say here. I think we have answered. We had answers 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and we talked about it and we put it out there, and we may not see it right now because our lifestyles and the way we work. The fact that you're on a ranch, you know, you're a few miles from town, we don't necessarily get to see the results of everything we're doing. But I'm seeing the results now. I'm seeing people coming out talking about the banks, talking about everything that's going on, and it seems, and it's even reaching mainstream news. It's like they can't ignore the fact that the NSA is tapping everybody's phones anymore. You know, I thought I was the only one having my phone tapped 10 years ago when they tried to kill me. And by the way, I've always had the.
I don't understand. I ran into something on the I guess it was sent to me uh, before I lost my internet connection totally. I saw pictures of what is considered current Detroit, and you're right, I am a bit isolated out here, insulated, if you will, from reality sometimes to what's going on in the inner city, but I thought I was looking at war-torn Germany just after the Second World War ended, and I'm looking at Detroit. What an awful picture I saw. That town has turned into a disaster area because of all this that you're talking about.
It has, and it certainly has. As a matter of fact, I saw an interesting comparison that Detroit and Nagasaki, and Nagasaki was hands above anything that we could see in Detroit. But, you know, I think we actually have answers, and I'm glad you brought up Detroit, because if we change just a little bit, just alter the way we think and the way we see things a little bit, we could fix Detroit in 6 months. Now, gentlemen, just
what you're talking about with educating, if we have to re-educate, because that is the majority of our problem, is the thinking of people that somehow it's either done and we can't fix it, or it is what it is and we'll be fine. You know, just living with it. Neither one of those things is a valid mindset.
well, one of the values in what I'm trying to put together right now, Timothy Bible College and the Little Red Schoolhouse play a major role. And I'm going to share this from the chat room. Willpower said, I think that farming as a lifestyle was much more possible before internet and social media made it possible for the country-raised kids to find out there was a big, shiny world out there. And I've kind of used that quote from that song. I'm sure you remember it from about 40 or 50 years ago. How you gonna get them back on the farm after they've seen L.A.? And what Willpower is saying, it will take a while longer for some of them to grow some degree of maturity and see the lies they've been handled. Now, we've been programmed to bring the kids in from the farm, send them into the city because the jobs are there. Nobody could come to move out to Bingham, New Mexico with me because they had a job. We got to stay in town for jobs. And so while we're working on those jobs,
Schoolhouses, nobody wanted to do the work. They didn't want to go to the little town and start a little red schoolhouse because that meant giving up their job, their 2 cars, and the roof was very good.
That's right.
But,
Too much trouble. Too much trouble.
Liberty Village.
Go ahead.
And you go back to the way that it must be, if we're going to exist, if we're going to survive this, you're right, it has to be back 150 or 200 years. But you're talking about acquainting people with a kind of labor that is a bit passe. As you said, we've got urban or big city internet lifestyles, and it doesn't include going out in the sun and getting a little dirty and a little sweaty 2 or 3 times a week to make sure that the animals are okay and the crops are brought in and that sort of thing. Even though we've got great equipment and technology, you're absolutely right. You've got to have the mindset into a different survival mode, and that is, if we're going to survive, we've got to go back. I'd like to go back to the Indian time, but I know we ain't done that. But we need to go back to my childhood time when we lived on farms and made them go.
Well, again, when I tried to put Liberty Villages together in New Mexico, middle of nowhere, New Mexico, I owned the north half of a 2-house town, Bingham, New Mexico.
And I was ready to move. I was ready to go set up a bastion of Timothy Bible College and Little Red Schoolhouse and make that even maybe the hub of all the rest of them, because I agreed with you there, and I still agree with you. That is a perfect solution.
Now, here's the adaptation here. Everything evolves. When to make things work, you have to think about it. I'll take everything into consideration. And now, whatever you come up, whatever solutions we come up with, if they're going to work, it's going to have to work without the money, without the banks, without the media, because nobody's on our side on that. They want to keep us as slaves. They want to keep us as peons. They want to keep us down. If we're going to be on the farm, they want to own the farm. And I think I found an answer to that. If you can't move to the country, why can't we move the country to the city?
Amen.
Now, you talk about Detroit. Let's talk about Detroit. If we went into Detroit and took some of those abandoned buildings and put more dirt on the floors, on the ground floor, and put some rollaway beds up on the second floors, and did a garden, or went to the roof and put a garden in, put solar on the roof. If we can grow our own food and generate our own energy, what do we need the banks for? What do we need the government for? What do we need? How did we live 100 years ago, coming across this country in 200 years ago in a Conestoga wagon? So
I make it real simple, Clay. If you take the bank out of it, if you don't owe a bank anything, if you don't have credit extended, they really can't enslave you like they want to.
okay, now let me address this. In the chat room, they're saying, "Well, not everybody's cut out for a farming life." Yeah, I know that. I know a lot of people that are too goddamn dumb to plant a garden, to make sure their kids are fed. We can just go to the grocery store. We can just go to McDonald's. Now, my suggestion here, and I'm not. I'll be right up front with you. I don't grow a garden, but Henrietta does, and we got tomatoes in the backyard. Now, if we bring the country, if we restore the self-sufficient family farm in the cities, in Detroit, in Dallas, in Houston, anywhere that we can, and it don't have to be a big operation. I've always worked out of my home. Since you've known me, I've always worked out of my home, haven't I, Jake?
Yeah. Well, and I've always been a rancher since 1980. I've been a rancher. And I can tell you, I've raised a couple of gardens, but gardening's not my thing. That's for other people to do, and we'll share, but you have to network. You hit on it, that we have to do what we can, what we're called to do, what we're adept at doing, and add that to the formula.
Well,
and not think, okay, we're going to exist just like we want to, and don't worry about anybody else. Yeah, that'll never work.
The whole farming industry in America has been taken over by Monsanto, Archer Daniels, Midland. They're growing genetically modified food because they want to control the food. No food that we don't own. So yeah, we need to have or the genetically modified food isn't good for you. And rats won't eat it,
Let me
but they
give
want
you
to feed
another
it to your
portion.
children.
Let me give you another portion of that. I am right now sitting on my front porch looking at nothing but green. And I have trees overhead and I have flowers at my feet. There are flowers all over my porch. I've got a couple of dogs up here licking my knees right now, but the thing that I have that is different than the people in the city is I'm producing my own oxygen. With all of this, and this is part of your Liberty Village thing, you're going to think better if your air is not so polluted. You're going to think better if your food is not so polluted, and if you can outthink the other guy, they don't control you. This is a formula to me that nobody seems to get. I'm sitting out here, I am very bright, and I do a lot of things with my mind, even at 71, that youngsters can't do because I have clear home-produced oxygen. All these plants are producing my atmosphere. We eat a lot of local produced food. I don't plant the gardens, but we go to Luling and buy stuff somebody just brought off their farm. It doesn't have all the chemicals. It's not been polluted by all the herbicides and chemicals that are put on the big corporation farm things. It's some little Joe that brings his stuff in because he's trying to exist. And that lends itself to your Liberty Village approach, is that this is people co-oping.
That's right.
They're sharing what they do with somebody who doesn't do that.
Well, you got the perfect example there. Randall Mark can fix anything. I can't fix anything. So when I needed a new tire for the Harley, he put it on.
As long as you got a paper clip and some bubble gum, Randall will probably fix it for you.
But this co-op concept now that is working right now. I mean, we talked about Liberty Villages 15 years ago, and it has happened. I've got a video up that'll be up on. I think it's up on Facebook right now about a couple in Pasadena that are producing 6,000 pounds of food. 6,000 pounds of food every year from 1/10 of an acre from their backyard in Pasadena, California.
Yeah. We can produce our own medicine if everybody got off the pharmaceuticals. Oregano and basil, and I can give you a whole list of them, actually are naturally produced. You can raise them in your backyard, herbs, and if you add to it the minerals in real water that hasn't been produced or processed by some entity that's trying to control you, we actually are going to be a healthier society, staying away from needles, of course. But everybody can't produce the herbs. But if we would, I'm buying oregano right now, and we just planted some oregano plants because why am I not paying a high price for somebody else's oil when I can do it right here? And that's the concept you're aiming at. If we would become more self-sufficient, then we lose that mandated, that absolutely have to bowing to somebody else's control thing. We don't have to be controlled or slaves to somebody else. We can do it within our own community, and then, you're in a bunch of like-minded people.
That's right. And in the with the co-op concept, I'm saying that we all need to work together. If you can buy your sugar, your coffee, your tea from the co-op at wholesale plus 10, I think it'd be we 10%, add 10% on the cost of the goods for handling for the paperwork is reasonable. I think that's reasonable. And you know, I get attacked and get hassled a lot talking about the Jews. But if the Jews want to work in this, if the Muslims want to work in this, if the Christians want to work in this, it all works because I don't want to come into your house and change what you do. I want to change the way you think a little bit. And in that house of yours, we can show you right now if you put some money over here, if you put some money over there, and I believe your lady Kay told us and found a source for solar panels, solar film. Hell, they've got paint that you can paint in your roof, and it'll absorb the sunlight. And so, if we could turn your house, show you. If you take this block, and I'm going to do a flyer on this. I'm going to do a flyer on there. If you and I'm just going to put it out in one block. One block. We'll start with one block. If we can show you how you can save hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands of dollars next year, and would you join a co-op for 50 bucks? 50 bucks a year. Would you join a co-op and agree to certain standards? Now, I'd like to see these standards incorporated into Timothy Bible College because we've lost so many skills, Jake. I mean, you talk about going back to the Indians. We lost a ton of information, with that transition and with that genocide. And as an American, I'm certainly not proud of that genocide.
Timothy Bible College is a farm and ranch course because in this area here, and we're supposed to be highly agricultural, I look around and nobody knows how to raise animals. Nobody knows how to raise crops. They're out there with an herbicide on cotton and with an herbicide on maize, and they're poisoning the very crop they're trying to produce that we're either going to wear or ingest. And they got 40 animals on 1 acre and think that that's the way to raise livestock. And then because that causes parasite problems, then they keep injecting them or pouring on them or having them ingest poisons produced by pharmaceutical companies who counteract all the parasites. If you allow them to graze and to perform as they would without man's help, you'd find out you didn't need all that stuff, and you actually would produce healthy animals, and it wouldn't poison us when we eat the meat. You've got this thing about not plowing. I don't plow. I don't fertilize. I got a horse and goats that fertilize. If I want to scoop some of it up, spread it to a arid area, it'll grow next year.
Okay, what you're talking about, Jake, what you're talking about is organic farming, and that is on the rise since we've been talking about this in the last 20 years. Since we've been talking about the problems, people have found answers for this. They have set up organic co-ops. I mean, this co-op is going right now in Oklahoma, and they've got certain guidelines printed. It's printed, so they're available to us. It's on the internet. Their guideline is about how you can grow. We're not going to allow GMO foods. We're not going to allow genetically modified seeds. We don't want it. We don't want to pay Monsanto, for their poisons. I mean, and the same Monsanto's producing the seeds and Terminator seeds, and they're producing the Roundup, which is a lot more deadly than you ever think. And here we go. We got somebody else on the chat room that's understanding here. They're seeing this. He says the goal should be to decentralize as much of our business as possible. At least 20 to 30% of the population should be engaged in farming. Local production and localized control of resources has to be the model for the future. The county, you got a county sheriff, you got a county militia, you got a county posse, and you got county farmers. This is restoring control locally. Because we walked into the judges there in your county. We've walked into the Better Business Bureau. We've introduced ourselves. We're welcome there. We're welcome, and this is people working together, decentralizing. Yeah,
let me back you up a minute.
Go ahead.
You got something there. You know, it's not the majority of the government. It's not the majority of the entity we look to as the controlling entity called government. Certainly not locally. That's the problem. And your guy on there that you just quoted is what we have to gather together. We have to get together all those, put away silly little tiny differences and gather us together for the common good. And we might get this done because, like you said, these judges, these city fathers, welcomed us and said, come do it. We need what you want to do.
Well, it's happening right now. Heisenberg, another host in here, he comes on Saturdays at 8 o'clock. We've had run-ins here on the chat room. You know, I'm not the kind of guy you can push around, and I'll fly off the handle occasionally. But he said this week we'll be teaching you about midsummer gardening techniques and propagations, how to select, protect, secure your own food stores and growing location, and ideas on stealth gardens in the event of a long-term social catastrophe. Hope to see you there. Somebody else called me the other day, and they were asking about chemtrails, and I said, well, somebody over here solved that. They put down some little tracks and rollers and hoops and put cotton or plastic over the hoops, so you can just, if they're spraying one day and you see the chemtrails out there, you can just go pull those that plastic over your plants and keep them pure, keep them clean.
Yeah.
We've got water filtration systems. We got water filtration systems. Yes, sir. Go right ahead. Yes, sir.
You know, I amen all the details you're putting out there, and somebody has to be putting out a plan, and you're doing that. But let me give the biblical bottom line as a pastor. Until we as a people, we as the remnant, turn away from the idols. I don't care what your God is that you claim your God to be. We have a drought in Texas that is absolutely devastating. I am looking out at a non-overgrazed territory here, and they're still green, but if I had one more animal out there where I'm looking, I'd be overgrazing, and it's terrible. We're looking at losing water supplies. Underground water is going to dry up, and this is not the government. This is not foreign entities. It's not corporations. It's God doing what he always does. He said, I will bring you a drought till you quit worshiping and bowing to foreign idols. And when you mentioned one group, I'll give you a whole list of them if you want them, but as long as we bow as a so-called Christian nation to whatever foreign entity comes in and offers us different gods, we're going to have these problems until we realize that's the bottom line.
Now, Jake, I have referred, in the chat room here, we don't talk about religious aspect. In other words, you know, if you want to beat your head against that wailing wall and knock yourself out, just don't try to get me to do it. You know, I ain't gonna do it. I ain't gonna stick my nose in the dirt, and my ass up in the air twice a day. I ain't gonna do that. But the Constitution allows you to worship as you want. My plan here, if we put together this block in the block I'm sitting in, and say, look, we want you to plant a garden in your backyard. Now, if you don't like gardening, you don't like doing that, and I don't like doing that. I don't like doing that any more than you do. You know, I can herd a cow, I can rope a steer, I can milk a goat. You know, I can do something like that. But we don't have to do all that. You got a kid that needs a job for summer. Let him handle your garden, and we share the co-op shares with the with you and with the co-op whatever you grow. Now, there's one family, like I said, they're doing 6,000 pounds a year. There's no reason we couldn't do that. Well, there are, Clay. You know you can't do that. The zoning won't allow that. The city won't allow that. The county won't allow that. The neighborhood association won't allow that. And I say, to hell with them. You know, God gave us the seeds. God gave us the plants. And this is my backyard, so you best stay away from me. And let me. There is no law, and I've talked to lawyers. I had a lawyer with the last week. They said, "Hey, man, growing your own food is a God-given right. They can't mess with you. They can't stop you from that. Now, if we're organized."
Let me give you my.
Go ahead, right ahead.
Let me give you my little bit. I have, and you've been out here and helped me with it. I have a bunch of, because, and largely because of the drought, I've got 12 or 14 huge oak trees that have died, and the bottom line is, I like cutting firewood. I will cut firewood. I'll stack it up. And if you are heating your house and cooking with wood, in your little co-op, your Liberty Type Village mindset approach, if you need wood, I got it. I will have enough for me and probably 12 or 14 other families. I'm going to have that much firewood.
Well, that's part of the trade. Now, here's the other thing. Again, God on the internet is my theory. God's on the internet. And by the way, the Bible talked about thou shalt not have any other gods before me. How many gods were there? Let's not bother to count. You know, don't want to tick off or get in a conversation with Odinites or anything. So, but if we do this as a co-op, we've got all of the people behind us and the lawyers behind us that'll do this pro se. We can. Where do we get your water? What if they cut your water rights off? Well, you got a roof. You know how to make a rain barrel so you can drink out of it. I mean, we have.
I'm doing that too. I'm making all my roofs do that. I'm putting gutters and run them off into tanks. It works.
That's right. That's right. And again, these are skills that we've lost. I mean, making wool. I mean, we got 10,000 products. China manufactures over 10,000 products out of hemp. Now we can grow hemp now in Colorado, and by the way, there's legislation in the Congress about allowing farmers to grow hemp again. That was the first attack on our monetary system and our health when they eliminated hemp. Hemp's also one of the.
Kind of like abortion. There should be no political involvement in either one of these issues. It never has been or should be a legal issue. If you can grow it and don't bother anybody else, then you ought to be left alone. And the thing about your own approach to children and that sort of thing, unless you're going out and killing other people's children, I don't agree with it. But if we're producing the greatest Holocaust of all time, and we're doing it in the name of politics, and again, we have allowed the government to take over areas they got no right in.
Well, that's right. Willpower says, I ran up against the Colorado water Nazis back in the 90s. They read me the riot act when they found out I was collecting rainwater. They said it all belonged to Kansas by treaty.
Oh, mercy.
And, here is the folks, they love to do that. They're doing that in Oregon, too. They love to do that. That's part of the control. If they can control the water and they can control the food, they got you under control. Now,
That's right.
this by doing this co-op, you can disagree with me all you want. You don't have to like what I do. I don't expect you to ride a Harley. I doubt if you could keep up anyway.
I can't even ride a horse anymore.
Well, I can ride horses too. I just prefer the steel horses. You put you put my 260 pounds on a horse, and he goes a little nuts about it. He goes, "Get this guy off of me!" But my first magazine was about rodeos and for today's cowboy. Now, again, they're going to try to stop this. They're going to, and they are. Now, we've got another thing. Now, here's we're talking bad about the banks. And I intend to keep doing that because you need to understand that your founding fathers told you if you ever allow a private bank to issue your money, the banks and the corporations that spring up around them will leave your children homeless in the land that we conquered. They've done that.
Yeah.
A million people lost their homes. What I'm proposing with this co-op is to give you the knowledge, to give you the access, to give you the addresses, to give you the numbers where you can buy the seeds, where you can buy the film. What do you got in your garage? You got tools in your garage? Can you make a frame, a wooden frame? Can you get a little bit of sticks and put a wooden frame together and make a solar panel for you? And then you can make one for your neighbor. Then you can make one for the next guy. We can turn a house. We can turn your house by digging up the backyard, getting rid of the crabgrass. You don't have to plow. Lay down wood chips. Costs a little bit of money, but it's probably a lot less than you're paying in your electric bills. Now, if you can turn that house into a source of income, and we can do it on a whole block, we can make a difference. We can turn this around.
Clay,
Yes, sir.
let me help your listeners with a sobering thought. Have they ever experienced a brownout or a blackout? And if they have, consider the fact that it didn't go away. All of a sudden, somebody just flipped a switch and they're not giving you energy for your house anymore unless you pay some kind of homage to them and bow to them as king. That is in our future, and the only way to avoid that, you and I have talked about this in the Truth Seekers, that if you can produce your own energy, you really have escaped. If you escape the bankers and can produce your own energy, then you can be independent.
But everybody's trying to make a profit, and that's why I'm proposing for this co-op. Everybody should be able to make a profit. Everybody should be able to market what they can do. Everybody, and it's a matter of barter. Now we've got a system. Here again, we're talking about the Federal Reserve. We're talking about the Federal Reserve. There are answers to that too, and that popped up 15 years ago. It was called Ithaca Hours. Today, I've got pictures of currency that's being used right now in a couple of different places in Colorado. It's called mountain hours or mountain money or Ithaca hours. It doesn't matter. And it's basically worth, and this is all going to be in my next article that I'm working on right now, Why Liberty Villages. They've got over 900 participants publicly accept Ithaca hours for services. And additional, some local employers or employees have agreed to pay or receive partial wages in Ithaca hours. Further continue our goal of keeping money local. Why should I join? If you have a business or provide a service, there are three main reasons to join the Hours Network. It's good for your business. Being listed in the print version of the Hours directory on the Hours website provide additional customers who have hours to spend or are looking for businesses to take them. Supports the local economy unlike dollars. Hours keeps money in the community to pay for our local economy. And it pays for itself immediately. If you pay $10 for a listing in the directory and we give you 2 hours worth $20, 4 hours if you join or renew at our annual meeting. All of the work's been done for us. They started this 15 years ago. This the organic gardening, they started a long time ago. And I think we got the knowledge.
Back to the days of yesteryear that worked then.
It's like combining a barter, and here's the key thing. They made computers. You might have a computer that was made in a little shack in a back room in Taiwan. Might have. They could build computers in there. Yeah. So or China.
And they don't last very long either, I can tell you that.
Now, why can't we do that in America? Because they are milking Americans. You're working for the corporations. You're working for the banks. They're creating the police state. They're letting the illegals come in here because that creates crime, which makes more of a need for the police state. The military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned you about grew to include what Ayn Rand warned you about. The government has no control over honest citizens, so they have to make criminals out of us.
Right.
Now, this co-op is just going to start, but, you know, when and I've got some novels that I'm going to be completing this year. I started them 45 years ago. One of the things about the criminal industrial complex here, and if we abolished all the laws against victimless crimes, that particular con, and I use the word wisely, that particular con of making cons out of honest citizens, that's a racket. Like war is a racket.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
I've been smoking pot for 45 years. I ain't never hurt nobody. I ain't never killed nobody. You know, got never stolen anything from anybody. Happened to me a lot. But why did I have to do time in prison? I made good use of my time. I wrote books. But if we abolish the victimless crimes, and the co-op we're talking about is a step towards that. We've now got the first hemp crop in America growing in Colorado right now. What I wrote about 45 years ago is happening now. Now, I don't agree with medical marijuana because God gave me that cannabis plant, that cannabis sativa. God gave me that, So why should I go and you take a seed and throw it out in your backyard, it'll grow. Why should I pay a doctor for a prescription to smoke something God gave me?
Same way with antibiotics. I've got oregano. Why not grow the oregano and aloe vera and cactus and the cloves and all these things that are natural curing agents, antibiotics, and tell the pharmaceutical people to go enslave somebody else and poison them.
You refer to the Bible as your answer book. And you know, the answers are in there. They warned you about the electronic banking that they're coming up with.
Mm-hmm.
And they just want it on the chip. They want it on the chip. You know, so the doctor will know how much money you got in your bank account. Now, so he'll know what medications, if you're taking your medications on a regular basis. But we can change that. Jake, I know you probably won't be hanging out for second hour, but I really appreciate what you're doing, and I tell you, Timothy Bible College and Little Red Schoolhouse will be a part of the Liberty Village Co-op.
God bless. Have a good day.
All right, sir. You too.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomsocials.com. We'll be right back.
What now will remain a dictatorship?
Oh, to be quiet.
Why are you guys so anti-dictator? Imagine if America was a dictatorship. You could let 1% of the people have all the nation's wealth. You could help your rich friends get richer by cutting their taxes and bailing them out when they gamble and lose. You could ignore the needs of the poor for healthcare and education. Your media would appear free, but would secretly be controlled by one person and his family. You could wiretap phones. You could torture foreign prisoners. You could have rigged elections. You could lie about why you go to war. You could fill your prison with one particular racial group, and no one would complain. You could use the media to scare the people into supporting policies that are against their interests.
Tune in Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time for Liberation Nation with Deacon John, where America comes to hear the truth.
I know this is hard for you Americans to imagine, but please try.